Ya'at She'e Lene Bitsui and She Kitla Cheatney and Schnetzotso ni Bashish Chin Twitch Eatney Dashache Ani Dashanelak Utad and then Sanshla. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We are here on Saturday, February 15th. Happy belated Valentine's Day to those of you who are still hungover from Valentine's Day yesterday. But I really, really appreciate all of you joining us on this very important knowledge, factually based information that we need to arm our people with. You guys should know the process of how the Nebebeso works, how our government functions, and how what history should have taught us as a tribe. Whether it be environmental impacts from coal or the loss of our aquifers, our waters, our natural springs, and also the industry of gaming and how it's affecting veterans, Navajo Nation veterans right now, elder programs, disability programs, scholarships, among many others. So I really feel that this session is so important to share with all of you, and just to ask questions of not only your chapter, but also your delegate and your president. I think it's so important to make sure that we are informed from people who have worked from the inside of the government, and also from those who have followed the government since the 1970s. And so I really hope and pray that this session, this live with Lene, will be something that you can take back and say, okay, this is how it works, because we're not fluffing anything. We're not making things pretty. We're going to give you factual information, and something that our current Navajo Nation media is not sharing, like the Navajo Times or KTNN. And I think that it's up to us to kind of gather together and say, this is how the Navajo Nation government is functioning. And this is the state now. Has it improved from when this 3-branch government came into Navajo Nation? So I have special guests here, and I want to introduce them. And I have 2 people who were supposed to be here in person, but it started snowing back on the Navajo Nation within the Netra. So I said, you know what? It's not safe to drive all the way down here. Stay put, enjoy the snow. We're going to work this out however we can. So we said, okay, let's go ahead and do a Zoom session. So right now I have Marley Shabala, famed investigative journalist and reporter. I also have Eleanor Smith, who is an environmentalist and advocate for the Navajo Nation, and a planner as well, and a community planner. Excuse me. And I also have former Navajo Nation Pearline Kirk as well, joining me in person. And so we're not experts in what we're doing right now as far as this media. I literally have my iPad up. I have my iPhone I'm holding. And so we're going to wing it, and we're going to figure out the best way that we can. Our whole point is, collectively as Sanis that are getting together, is to get the information out to you and say, this is what's going on. This is what's happened. And now history is repeating itself. We need to inform the people because no one else is. And it's up to us to ensure that our people have the knowledge to empower themselves and say, no, this ends now. Idle no more. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first guest, in-person guest. Her name is Pearline Kirk. I, for one, have the highest respect for her. She has gone through so much. For those of you who don't know, she was the controller for the Navajo Nation when it was the Nez Leiser administration. And so, but she's here joining us in person, and I really appreciate her acceptance and in me inviting her, because I know it's probably not easy for her after everything our tribe put her through, the traumas and everything that has happened to her. And she, above all anything else, said, this is for the people. I'll do it. So I really appreciate her joining us to share her knowledge firsthand of how our Navajo Nation government works. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pan over. She's sitting right next to me. And if you can, Miss Pearl, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about your background too? So this is Pearline Kirk, everybody.
Do you want me to hold it?
Yeah, you can hold it.
Okay. All right. Well, Shitsui, yeah, Ado, yeah, Kodo, that is not Agi, not and thank you for hosting me. Yeah, Lene made some fry bread and stew, so it was delicious. Shea Pearline Kirk, and Shea Ado, Yisina Shahade, Kintlichi, Lokan Tiel Birate, Ado, Adonna and Schlinigi, ya, Tudich eating Schle, Ado, na Kredene Abashin, do, my deshkijin dashe do trampahe dashinale ado the kushina khayata Navajo Nation ajita inishigi e ya based on dehiki e benashnish controller oliel e ya shinanish ishla shtlatna khaydashina e akoho ado alhiti kata jeno ado saho ban hodilne dash jeno la salin ashin kodini. So just introduce myself in Navajo. I'm originally from Ganado, Kintlichi area, and a few years ago I was the controller for the Navajo Nation for a number of years. My clans are Bitterwater, born for the Mexican people clan, not the one down south. And my grandpas are the Jemez Coyote Pass clan, and my Nollies are Trapai, which is the by the beach clan. So, anyways, so thank you for having me. I'll give it back to Lene. Yes, we're kind of winging it, so bear with us. We're not that tech, so.
Yeah, we're actually sitting here together, and I don't have the equipment to really show like Anyway, we're going to make this work, everybody. Thank you, Pearline, for introducing yourself and joining me. I made fry bread this morning, and I made some hot stew. So I made sure she's fed so she can give us all the information that you and I are going to be asking as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn this camera around, and I'm going to have Marley Shabala introduce herself. And without further ado, Marley, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, yes. Oh, Yante, Marley Shabali, and she had Toheglini and Shvon on his Ezra team. And I'm a freelance investigative journalist. And I've been doing that for well over 40 years, just here on the Navajo Nation. There have been times when I wasn't working for a newspaper, and I was working independently, and I also worked for other newspapers. But mainly the Navajo Times, KTNN, the Gallup Independent, the Farmington Daily Times. And being here on the Navajo Nation has really been a wonderful experience for me. It's not challenging and always interesting and always an adventure. I really appreciate life here on the res. You know, I hear sometimes that people think that, it's, nothing's going to get done. It's a terrible place. But there's, it's our homeland, and our homeland is our mother. Our mother is our homeland. Shahat for tuning in.
Thank you, Marley, for introducing yourself and actually for joining us as well. Eleanor, I'm going to go ahead and switch to you. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and who you work for as well? Eleanor?
Okay, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's hello everybody. She Eleanor Smith in this yeah. Not of net hatching in Shanky and Annie Bush's chin, Chishay, that's a shade or she doesn't it's not stand Asha, although also hail from like Lene, several different places. Red Mesa, Utah, where we have our ranch. Shiprock, New Mexico, where we've raised our family and we still have our home and our farm here. And so I'm just happy to be here. For inviting me, Lene, sister, and I work as a community organizer for Tuan Jona, which translates to Sacred Water Speaks. And as a community organizer, the way I usually explain in Navajo is Nihimana Hassan Bayashkit Obachah Yashkit without Asian Nishnatip. That's what I do is I educate, I inform our local communities about environmental issues that are impacting their communities. And so that's what my job is. So
Oh, yeah, sister, for joining us as well. And so these are my guests, Miss Pearline Kirk, Marley Shabala, and Eleanor Smith. And I really appreciate them joining us on this discussion to inform our people on the goings-ons of our government. And I'm going to go right into it. I'm going to ask Miss Pearline Kirk if she can, like me, I don't know about you guys. I don't know how our funds on Navajo are distributed. And I think that's a great foundation to start this little roundtable with. I think that you and I should know how the heck are Boo Nygren and Speaker Curley and Joanne Jane from the Department of Justice, how do they split money between them when it comes to these comprehensive budgets? And because for me, it's very hazy and I don't understand. And then another example I can share is like, how does the president sign contracts or receive money without council's input? So those are questions that have never really were clear that I just don't have the education on. And this is why I invited these esteemed women, these Sanis, to share with us their knowledge on all things Navajo Nation government. And I want to also say this is all on a volunteer basis. Nobody's paid, nobody's sponsoring this. It is me that had invited Eleanor, Marley, and Pearline Kirk here to share the knowledge in which I don't have to give you because I would rather get it straight from the source. So without further ado, I want to ask Pearline Kirk, can you share with us how budgets are split between the three branches? I can hold it. You can.
Okay.
Just in case you need it.
All right. So as far as your budget question, the way it works is typically in March, there is a revenue projection that starts with the controller's office. And so what that encompasses is the Navajo Nation receiving unrestricted dollars, which is usually general funds. So if you're an accountant, and you're doing governmental accounting, then you'll know that there's various different funds that the government has. So general funds, general funds, in March. So the controller's office, minerals, they come up with a projection basically for that year of how much general funds we think the nation would bring in. And this is usually the oil and gas royalty, what we expect out of, royalties, coal leases, oil and gas, as well as taxes. And the nation has, I believe, 9 or 11 different taxes, anywhere from sales taxes, oil and gas severance taxes, business activity taxes, construction taxes, hotel occupancy tax, all of those things. Those are usually the ones that are projected. Then there's other things like cell tower leases, those types of things. So those are all on the general funds. And so it starts the process. Auto, OOC, OMB, they all come together. There's a number of exercises that take place. Auto, at some point, there has to be a branch chief meeting. So the branch chief, as Lene said, is usually the president, the speaker, as well as a chief justice. So ade ya beso projection igi on the general funds edigi at ye khatat atla. So they negotiate this projected amount. So as I understand this year, I don't know, I believe it was done.
Yeah.
There was a projection. I want to say it was 220 million. You know, as you can imagine, this projection is also, you know, the parties that come together, Minerals and OOC and Tax Commission, they have to look out into the future to see what oil and gas prices will be. And then also looking at the tax collections as well. So, you know, and then comes the 3-branch chief meeting. This year, I believe it was 220 million. However, I want to say this is unprecedented. Maybe Marlene knows a little bit. But at this point in time, as I understand, there's still not an approved comprehensive budget. So it's close to Q2 and there's no comprehensive budget. So what that means is I think this past year, even though there was a branch chief meeting, I believe the speaker wanted to go with last year's number. And I think last year's number was less. It was around 200 million. So there's a $20 million difference between the projection versus last year's projection, or last year's budget, I should say. You know, there's I guess you can say a disagreement. And I believe the former attorney general issued a legal opinion on that. And so, ela, you know, that auto projection, you know, so should we follow that instead of, if for some reason there's a hang up, usually you would go, you know, if there's an impasse, etc., usually you would, you know, late fiscal year, October 1st, if there's not an approved budget, so then what they'll do is they'll say, last year, you know, we'll proceed, you know, and so that's pretty much what happened. And again, as mentioned, in Q2, so in a typical process, obviously the budget has to be approved by council before October 1st. And so in March, they have budget hearings. A lot of the departments, they have oversight committees. So like, you know, DPS, for instance, their oversight is LOC. OOC, it was BNF, you know, so, a oversight, usually you look at last year's budget, and then you look at the biggest component is usually personnel costs. So they go through the committee, then they go to Nabik then council. So what happens on that also, this is just the budget process. There's another component, which is, you know, we're in the current fiscal year. What's also happening is the audit from last year. So the books are closed, and then those numbers have to get audited. So some of those numbers have a bearing on the budget process currently as well. And so that's how it works, just so everybody knows. So any given time in the controller's office, they're dealing with the audit, which starts in December. And obviously then it has to be approved by council before the budget for the next year gets approved. So during the same year, the OOC, they have to record the current year transaction. So they're dealing with the past, they're dealing with the current, and then they're dealing with the future. So that's pretty much how it works. I believe yesterday they postponed it again for the comprehensive budget. So what that means is if they don't sign it and get a budget in place, then just the uncertainty, just working on last year's levels and so forth. I kind of wonder why there was an impasse. Ha'ila benina, there's about a $20 million difference, between the projection and last year's levels. I'm not trying, I was trying to understand, why. The only thing I can think of is, I know one of your question was explaining the UUFB.
Yeah.
The UUFB is the undesignated unreserved fund balance. So what that in the neck achiko ya azisen shinigi de ya. So what that, I was thinking about it. Ha'ila benina azisen shinigi de shnin so ya. That jo but after like the bottom of the pile. So in that timeline and what happens, the current accounting period and the budget, those three have been the initial. So as part of the comprehensive budget process too, the books get closed from the prior year. That past fiscal year was operating on a projection. So everything goes to actuals, that gets audited. If you over project, you'll get some UUFB, you'll get a balance. So as I understand, when I worked with the nation, the UUFB was never negative because that means there's a deficit. So there's always UUFB deshne akoho so do ya badaho ziho ado council delegates OPVP jo base of the seho akontatija. So that's where they start planning for their projects. They start doing the legislation to get the appropriation for the UUFB. So, as part of the budget also, just to be complete, it's not just general funds, it's also a lot of other different funds. There's special revenue funds, proprietary funds. This is all the fund accounting, in what it's called fund accounting, FUND, and that's all governmental accounting. So part of the budget process also, and I think one of your other questions was, what is the Sihasin fund? So there's other funds like the Sihasin, permanent fund, so some of those things based on the income, interest income, because they're invested. So based on anas neliki. So some of those interest income those need to, sometimes they fund departments. Like for example, veterans, so there's veterans housing dollars, and then there's just regular veterans, dollars that once they're, the amounts are figured out and finalized, then those get budgeted as well. So the controller's office, like for example, Veterans Trust, Veterans Trust, your spot for this year, and that amount goes to the department, and then they're responsible for creating a budget. They have plan of operations, so on all the monies that are spent, the different funds, they have what's called a plan of operation. So that's how, just kind of a snippet. I don't know if you want me to show you like the what we drew.
Yeah, actually, Marley had a question. Marley, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Hang on, let me turn.
Yes. When you were talking about what was going on currently, I think people are trying to figure that out, because there's a process, and but what is not being, the people are not being informed that this is the first time this kind of a dispute has happened, and that's what's holding up the budget, is that the three branches are supposed to work together, but they're not. And so as a result, you have the president not allowing his staff to attend any of.
Oh, I think she pressed a button. Oh, okay. So we lost her. I think she pressed a button. So Marley was in the middle of explaining what's going on between the three branch chiefs or three branch leaders, because they have to be in agreement in order to pass this comprehensive or even create the comprehensive budget. So there have been a lot of issues. That's why it's delayed. We are now in February. And Pearline, as far as you know, has it ever ran this late in passing the budget?
As far as I know, not this late.
Yeah.
So I think this is unprecedented. And it's kind of interesting because, generally speaking, you would think that the projection that comes out is, nobody's ever questioned that. So I don't know if it's a matter of the numbers are questioned, or, one party just wants what they want. So, is Marley back yet?
Yeah, Marley, are you back on with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
I know. And just a quick note to people out there that want to contact me and want me to bring up something, don't call me, because now, it knocked me off Zoom because I was trying to not answer the call, and just email me your questions or statements. Anyway, so that's the issue here, is there's a dispute among the three branches.
Yeah.
And so you have the president who, and this goes to political appointees. And so he has that authority to direct his cabinet, who are the division directors, not to go before the council and present during the budget hearings, not to present their budgets. And so the council is trying to figure out how to have the budgets, do the comprehensive budget without the executive branch's input. And then for some reason, the Chief Justice has decided that she needs an additional, I can't remember, it was like $2 million or something. And the council asked her in the last, their last quarterly meeting, which was their winter session, which was earlier this month, or January, what she wanted to use that money for, and they asked her for an actual budget, and she didn't have the budget to justify it. It's just not, for some reason, the Chief Justice Joanne Jane and Navajo Nation President Boo Nygren have decided they're not going to participate in the budget process, but they blame the Navajo Nation Council for not getting a budget before them so that they can approve a budget. So the budget is being held hostage, basically, by the executive branch and the judicial branch.
Wow.
Has that ever happened as far as, OPVP or the president asking the vision director to not show up? I mean, that seems like, how can you not participate? Because that's your budget,
That's what I mean. Is the president is holding our budget hostage, and no one is saying exactly why. What do they want? Did they overspend did the executive branch overspend it to budget, or do they have extra funds that are available now, which is really needed, for what's happening with the very frigid weather?
Right.
And the judicial branch not justifying $2 million budget, that just, this is our judicial branch. It was bad enough that our Navajo Nation Department of Justice, under President Jonathan Nez, was made into a donation center.
Oh, gosh.
Under COVID, for money to be sent to. And they still can't account for where those monies went to. The process is there. But and now we know that if the branches don't want to participate, that's when it falls apart for the budget.
So now it's just delayed because it seems that there's no agreement among the three branches,
Well, it sounds like the executive branch and judicial want dibs. They want the extra 20 million that's in the projection. So they want that additional to be budgeted. You would think that though council would, use their subpoena powers, to get everybody to come in, and participate.
I agree. And I think that with what happened yesterday, there was a meeting yesterday. So for those who are interested, you can go into YouTube and listen to yesterday's BNF Budget and Finance Committee meeting. It is on YouTube, and it was the whole day that they discussed this comprehensive budget. And I think it ended like last evening, like around 5 or something like that. And so I think that there's definitely something going on between the three. And now it's going to kind of it will affect the people, the programs, the services that is provided. And so this is why it was just so important for all of us to understand what's going on with these budgets. And also, what is comprehensive budget? What is CHSN? What is UUFB? Why do we always hear council delegates talking about, oh, I want to take out 100 million from CHSN so we can give tractor heavy equipment to every chapter across and so my thing is, I'm going to go ahead and kind of veer from comprehensive budget because it's up in the air. It hasn't been signed. It hasn't been approved by president. So it's all up in the air. So that's where I wanted to bring this point to you about the comprehensive budget. It's very important. But as Pearline Kirk and Marley said, that it's just never run this late without it being approved. Something is up. That's the issue. Something is going on, and these three branches are not communicating and being transparent with the people, us. So that's that. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch topics. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask Pearline if she wants to add anything.
It just sounds like it's a $20 million tug of war between, the branches basically. But what I wanted to share, before you turn it over was back to the budget process. Yeah. 3 branch chiefs, they meet, they agree, and they divvy it up between the branches. And I'm just kind of letting everyone know how this process works, notwithstanding what's currently happening. And once, before they divvy it up, there's a thing called fixed costs. Things that the nation has to pay, like it says, fixed costs. It's got to be paid. It's not borne by one of the branches. So that gets taken off the top, basically. And then it gets divvied up by the 3 branches. Then each respective branches, everything trickles down. Obviously, executive branch will get the most. Auto, at that point on the executive, and I'm not sure about legislative or judicial, but at least as to executive, OPVP in the past, at least while I was working there, and I'm sure the practice is still there, they'll do their mini, we'll pull some money off to the side, and even at the expense of, oh yeah, your budget from last year was 4 million, but now it's going to be 3.8. And we'll take, 200,000, we'll take this here, that here, and we'll have our own little pot. That's what OPVP will do. And then as a department division, then each director has to go beg. I've had to do it a lot of times. So depending on if OPVP likes you, they'll give it to you. If you're in with them, and they want their pet project, and you're responsible for it, and you can do it, then they'll give you money at that point. If you're not, their favorite, then you have to beg for other places. Obviously, myself, when I was a controller, nobody liked me because I kept saying no to everybody. And that just comes with the territory because, you're the numbers person. So there's other pots of money where you can beg. You can beg for, like BNF, they were in charge of what's called the personal lapse fund. That's always a big topic, because basically the personal lapse fund, if you hear about it, is, during the past year, it's basically the money that was budgeted, for positions, but they were all vacant. So it's like the vacant position pool, and there's personal lapse fund savings. So those are, pots of money. There's usually different pots of money, but those are the 2 I can think of where, during the budget hearings, if you happen to listen, they'll take, it's a kind of a tit for tat thing. If they like you, somebody likes you, then they'll say, okay, you only got enough to, fund your budget for 3 quarters, and, you're begging for the last quarter of personnel costs, then you're going to have to ask, for the personal lapse fund or OPVP with their fund, so that's kind of the internal workings, just so you know. And there are times when, divisions like, OOC, we would only have enough to fund 3 quarters of personnel costs. And then you kind of have to, beat the bushes and find the other quarter. Because obviously nobody wants to lay off people and so forth. Mm-hmm. So those are just some tidbits on the budget process.
I actually have a question, Pearline. Hang on. As you can tell, my audio staff is messing up here. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so I have a question for Pearline here. So from my understanding, this comprehensive budget, I'm going to put it in the Lene terms because this is how I'm comprehending this. So in this perfect world scenario, I'm the president of the Navajo Nation. And I'm giving an example. Mm-hmm. I'm the president of the Navajo Nation, and I have all these divisions within my executive branch, DCD, human resources, the list goes on. And so once the comprehensive budget is agreed upon and it's signed off on, now all this money that was meant for the President Lene, and all her divisions under her, I'm getting that whole lump sum now from the comprehensive budget. So now I'm like, okay, here's this pot. And now I got our part of this money for the executive branch. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, now I got this big pot of money. Now it's up to me to start divvying up this pot of money to DCD, human resources, land acquisition, whatever divisions there are. But me as the president, I'm going to say, DCD, I know we're supposed to give you $1 million for all your services, but I'm only going to give you 600,000. And then we're going to leave this 400,000 in this personal lapse fund.
That's
Is
what
that what I'm understanding it that way?
That's what I explained.
Okay.
Like that's where I'm saying, like,
Okay.
if last year my budget was 4 million, and I submit my budget like, 4 million, maybe 4.1 or something.
Yeah.
But what they'll do is they'll say, oh, you only get 3.7. And you're like, crap, and then they'll take some off the top, basically.
Okay, so now me as president, I'm holding funds from DCD or the controller's office, but I'm bringing that extra and I'm putting in our own pot as the president. I'm going to keep part of that money.
Well, what they'll do is they'll have a kind, I guess you can call it like a little fund that they create.
Yeah.
And then that's where they'll fund who they like. Like, Lene over here, needs 1/4 of personnel costs, or somebody needs to do a project that they know that will make them look good, basically.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, oh, I'm going to fund that special project.
Yeah.
So it happens, it's kind of like the fixed cost pool, only that's fixed cost. And there's stuff on there that I think aren't really fixed costs, but that's a way to that's always going to be funded, right? But then once things get divvied out, then there's this practice of creating a little pot, and then they can,
So I control the money at the end of the day as president. I still control it. I know like the controller's office they have fixed costs. So, but I'm going to make sure that that's taken care of. But I'm going to still withhold some money. That's where these division directors, if you're a favorite, the president will say, well, I like Pearline, but I don't like Marley's group. I'm only going to fund Marley's group, 3/4 of what she was asking for. But I like Pearline, so I'm going to give her everything she was asking for. So that's where the president has the power over who gets what. Within their branch, if that division director is in his or her favor, then I'm going to be playing favorites and say, okay, Pearline, here you go. Here's all the money you were asking for. And, but over here, Marley's branch, she has been difficult. She hasn't been playing ball with me. So I'm going to withhold 1/4 of her budget.
Yep.
So that's what we're talking about in this scenario is the president has the ultimate control. And that's why division directors have to play ball in order to get their departments funded.
Just so you know, there were many of times. I remember one time where they pretty much didn't fund me for the fourth quarter for personnel costs. And then they tell you, oh, we don't want to riff anybody. And you're like, okay, so then give me the rest of my budget. And I remember Arbin Mitchell sitting there because he was working at OPVP, and I'm like you're Arbin, and I'm like, Arbin, and I'm like, the checks aren't going to write themselves. They're not going to walk themselves out the door. You need us. We need to process the checks.
Yeah.
And he'll be like,
Yeah.
It was funny. Just little memories.
Yeah. And I think I think this is where her knowledge as a controller really, this is how I'm understanding it. And I'm glad that she is here to confirm, this is how it works. What I just said, if I'm President Lene and, I don't like Pearl's group but I love Marley because she plays ball, I'm going to fund her entire department. And then that's where you have division directors having to beg for money from their own president to fund their division.
Can I just add
Yes,
one last
yes,
thing
yes.
regarding the budget? One thing that's important I just thought of was, you go through the budget hearings, within OPVP and then BNF, and BNF can pull your budget too. They can say, you know what, I want to fund this pet project and I'm going to take it from here. That can happen too. Yeah, so yes. And so that happens, but as it makes it up all the way to council and they pass a budget, then it has to go across the street. So anything with appropriation, the president, and this is the checks and balances, the president has line item veto authority, which is final. So once they do the line item veto, just like what it says, then it doesn't go back to council to override. Everybody's stuck with it. So that's, the checks and balances, if you will. So.
Okay, and Marley has a question, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to Marley. Go ahead, Marley.
Well, a lot of it, again, goes back to political appointees and what you're talking about and the pressure that's put on political appointees.
Right.
Who are the division directors, and divisions are the ones that provide services to the people. The Navajo Council appropriates the funds to the executive branch and to the judicial branch and to themselves, all to provide services to we the Diné. So, but with political appointees, there are specific policies, and Perlino understands what it means to be a political appointee. And basically, you don't have any rights if you're terminated, but you also have a large number of perks. Also, it also depends on that position. The position she was in as controller, which is overseeing, she's the banker, she's overseeing the funds. She's also accountable for those funds. So that's why she would say, you cannot do that, not because I'm saying it as Perlene Kirk, but because that's in the contract you signed when you receive this money from the federal government. That money belongs to the people, so you have to spend it according to these laws. There are laws in place, but who speaks up for those laws? The Navajo Department of Justice and the Chief Legislative Counsel's office. But there are no voices there that are speaking on behalf of the law, which is happening right now, where? With the Orange Man. Mm-hmm. And that is dealing with also what Perlene mentioned about if divisions come before the council, they can take money out. And they did that with the president in the last budget round. They took some of his funding. And so they're like I said, they had made our budget a hostage. And so that funding is for services for we the people. And also accounting for that money that was spent this past year. Did we get the services that they said we got? Because that audit is also supposed to show if that money was spent according to what the Navajo Nation Council passed, the expenditure plan. There are laws and policies regarding how our funds are spent. But who enforces it? Who enforces it, Perlene?
That's a great question.
So earlier I mentioned that any given time, either working on the budget, working on the accounting transaction of the current fiscal year, budgets are looking into the future, and then audits, as Marley mentioned, is a look back, the previous fiscal year. So the nation does have what's called the financial audit as well as the single audit. Single audit, what that means is, anybody who receives at least $1 million with any given year, not receive, but expend, restricted funds, which is federal funds, other funds, they have to have that audit. And so it's intensive, as you can imagine, because Navajo is the largest tribe and has the largest of, any given time on average, there's about 4,000 active contracts and grants that are restricted funds. So anywhere from 638 funds, which are paid ahead, and then also a lot of other grants, mostly from the feds, sometimes from the state. Those are all, given to the nation. So there's 4,000 approximately any given time. And those funds are grant agreements. They have different time frames. So they're not all on the same as the Navajo fiscal year period. Like Head Start. Head Start's grant year ends, I believe it was February. And so some of them end in June, some of them in December, so all of that, because we're using grant funds, these audits you can think of them as report cards, back in school, right? And so, you get measured by what's called your internal controls, your procurement. I know this is another question later on. Your procurement, your ability to follow those rules, whether you're spending the money as they are allowed by the grant agreement, and so forth. Lots of things go into it. And during my tenure, I know leading up to when I started, I remember the single audits that the Navajo had. I think one year it was 22, and then it went to 11. And then during my time, I think it went to 10. I want to say 7. And then literally two days before I was let go, the auditors and I were on the phone and we discussed the single audit findings, and it was 4.
Wow.
And the reason why that's important is because then that's the feds looking at you, right? Or the state, and they say, wow, Navajo knows how to, have control measures in place to spend this money as it should be spent without, findings. And literally the auditors and I were on the phone discussing how to get the Navajo Nation off what's called the high risk category. The nation for the better of 50 years have been on the high risk category. Wow. What that means is out of those 4,000 grants and contracts, most of them are reimbursement. They call reimbursement. So you have to front the money and then ask for reimbursement from these granting agencies. The only ones that aren't like that are your 638 funds or your transportation funds. Otherwise the nation fronts those monies and then they get the reimbursement. This is actually a good discussion in light of what's happening, at the federal level right now, because with one of Trump's executive order, he said no more federal financial assistance. So what does that mean? I mean, he actually shut down Treasury's payment management system. And, I know of places that were freaked out saying we can't get on the PMS system and can't do drawdowns. Like universities couldn't do drawdowns. Some of them could squeeze them in, and they were freaked out. So then what does that mean, like, say, for Navajo? Like for right when that happened, that's right around when the scholarship office, when the college kids go back to school. And I believe, that contract was, a calendar year contract. So sometimes the federal budget also has an impact on Navajo, because if they're not approving the budget in time, then, our office had to rely on what they call NOGA notices, basically the award letters, and we have to front the money to send checks out to the various universities. And I always get asked, like, are you going to front the money? And I have to say, well, where's your award letter? Where's this? Because the last thing I would need is to get caught and not get the reimbursement or not get the grant coming in from the feds. So those are instances where the Navajo Nation, number one, heavily depends on contracts and grants to provide services, as Marley mentioned. And so if the feds are starting to look into this stuff, then you can bet these are problems. Services may be impacted. And I get that nationally, tribal groups, NARF and what have you, they're going to be trying to argue to say, hey, we have treaty rights, and by law, by treaty, we are supposed, federal government has that trust responsibility to us to keep these services going, but I will tell you, as of yesterday, IHS, BIA, BIE, Interior, people were let go. So it's really a scary time. And Navajo Nation being heavily dependent on contracts and grants and federal dollars, that's something to look out for. Marley, I think you're itching to say something.
Yeah, Marley, I wanted to also ask if you know how much audit was found in under the current controller, Sean McCabe. Do you remember?
One of the years, I know it went back up. During my tenure, I believe with the last year, it was 4, including addressing all these reoccurring property audit findings. And then I think the following year it jumped to 12. So it went up to double digits, and I don't know where it's at, like the latest and so forth. But yeah, it's, some of the things that impact these audit findings or financial statement findings is let's say your caliber, I guess you can say caliber of people that are hired, the degreed accountant, the number of degreed accountant. And that was always my thing when I was there, was trying to recruit people, accounting's accounting, you know the rules or you don't, you've been taught that or not, So that was my thing, was trying to get more people involved with the profession, becoming CPAs, or at least get their accounting degrees and so forth. So those all have an impact. The other thing that has an impact also would be your procurement rules. Should I go into procurement?
Actually, I think Marley had a question.
Okay, procurement rules, following the rules, enforcing the rules. Those are all compliance components that help with the audit findings. Okay.
Okay, Marley, do you have a question? I'm going to go ahead and switch it to you real quick to add on to what Pearline just shared.
Well, regarding the audit findings, the last audit that's the thing, the controller reports the audit findings. And it would seem that it would be the council that would go into some type of enforcement mode to report any audit findings, to address them. But it's like they just, oh, okay, all right, that's thank you for your report, let's vote on it. And there are no questions as to him, as to Sean McCabe, reporting to the council. None of the Navajo Nation enterprises are making a profit. And he actually recommended to get rid of them. Do you remember him making that report, Lene?
No, I don't remember that particular meeting.
Yeah, that's what he reported. But then now you have President Nygren announcing that they're going to open up another casino.
Oh yeah.
At Horseman's Lodge.
Wow, I did not know that.
And none of the gaming reports are presented in open session. Only once And that was early on before this 25th Council's Budget and Finance Committee. And I explained that to the B&F Committee Chairwoman, Shawndine Parrish. I thanked her. I said, thank you for, allowing, making them report in open session, because they have never done that.
Wow.
They do. There are some of our council delegates, play their little game and say, okay, yeah, we'll vote to go into executive session. The Resources and Development Committee did that
Yeah.
regarding CKP. And I was sitting right there listening to them. And that's when the RDC Vice Chairman, Johnson, had one of the staff members come over and tell me to go to the back of the room. Because I put it on my Facebook page that, hey, this is probably what's going to happen. They're going to ask for a separate meeting. They're going to remove that report off of the agenda, and they're going to call it a leadership meeting, which means it's not really a committee meeting. So therefore, they don't have to Zoom it. They don't have to invite us into it.
Yeah.
And then they said, and because we can also claim attorney-client privilege, and then it can be an executive leadership meeting.
They bend the rules.
Discussing that in front of me before they went into their meeting, and what do they expect? I'm going to report that. And
Yeah.
you don't do that. Dude, that discussion should have happened in open meeting, and that's what I mean. There are laws that are supposed to protect our right to know what our Navajo government is doing. But, it's like we have our council policing themselves.
Yeah.
That's it. We don't like it. It is happening. And the president is policing himself. And the Chief Justice is policing herself. And we, the people, are watching them police themselves. And, we think, well, that term police, it's supposed to be meant for, hey, they're enforcing a law to be accountable. But no, it's not happening. And it makes me also think that perhaps the reason that President Nygren doesn't want the division directors participating in the budget hearing is that during that budget hearing, they have to present and justify their budget for next year, 2026. And they have to justify it with their 2024 budget. Mm-hmm. So they have to bring that budget forward and show this is how our money was spent. But in looking at some of the comments and information that's appearing on the recall Facebook, it's repeated over and over and over again that division directors, political appointees, and this is not the first time I've heard this. I've heard this under past administrations. They're brought in during the division meetings, and the president says, I want you to take this amount out of your annual budget and give that to me so I can go travel, so I can go campaign, so I can just do whatever I want with it. So the president has his own little slush fund.
Yep.
Wow.
But that just reminds me of there have been instances where and I think it was at the end of Begay Nez administration. I know Begay, as soon as Nez started running, Begay pretty much, ostracized him, I guess you can say. And during that time, kind of like VP, right?
Right.
VP issues.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
VP drama or whatever.
Yeah. Drama.
Anyways, and we got reports that, because, basically, I don't think he had a P card. I think Begay pulled Nez's, budget items, basically just kind of.
Exactly what Boo did to Montoya.
So that's not new. And so, and we were finding out, and this is when Begay or Nez was then doing his runs, right?
Yeah.
That was his way to campaign, so to speak. We were find out programs were funding these runs, or they were spending money for him,
like the campaign stuff.
running, for.
It's not really, campaigning in a sense, buying a sign that says vote for Nez. But, doing that, using the money and there's his name on it,
We had a
He's out there
problem.
running.
we had a problem with because it's restricted funds, that becomes a problem, because you have to justify it, but not just justify it internally in Window Rock, but you have to justify it to your granting agency, so
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
They
This
made a contract.
yes. And that brings up another one, sorry, but I remember people don't grasp the concept of these grant funds. When the nation enters into it, they're waiving their sovereignty because they're saying, okay, the feds are basically saying, here, take our money, spend it like how we told you, and you're going to waive your sovereignty. And the nation does it, takes the money. And the way that came up was Head Start. Head Start went crazy one year. We had some issues. And I think Arbin Mitchell was involved. Let's just say that.
He's always involved.
Yeah. And, I was ready to get the audit finalized, and in comes this press release that President Begay did. And he was sitting there basically saying to the feds, like, oh, we have sovereign immunity, so, nanny.
that your rules don't apply to
Yes.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. We take the Head Start money, but we have sovereign immunity. And I'm just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And I had to fight to make sure my audit that I'm on the verge of completing so that we can get on with the budget process. I had to do damage control. And then on top of that, it was like nobody knew how to do investigations. So we had to do some investigation. And, those are some of the things that come up, and some basic things that are misunderstood as well. So just so everybody has a context, I think the comprehensive budget, that total package right now is double the general funds. So you have all these other all these other funds, like, departments get funded with. And so I think it's around 400 million. So
Yeah. And I think that, along
kind of
those,
see our face.
I know. I think that, along that, discussion about the comprehensive budget, and also the audit findings that are happening now, which are higher than when Pearline Kirk was our controller, we have to, this is why we're on the high risk end on that report card as Navajo Nation, because we don't know how to handle our money. That's why they tell us, hey, Navajos, you guys need to pay for these services. Use your own money up front, and then we'll reimburse you, because we're not to be trusted, because we're at a high risk level. And so that's why, when it comes to federal funds, what she was just saying is, here you go, Navajo Nation, we're going to give you $1 million in federal funds, and it's to be used for Head Start. And if the rules aren't followed, and you have a delegate or a president coming in saying, like President Lene, saying, hey, we got $1 million from the feds for Head Start, but we're a sovereign nation, and we're going to use that million how we see fit. And that's where Pearline Kirk said, no, it doesn't work like that. You can't accept money from the federal government without saying, here you go, we're going to give up our sovereign immunity in order to get this money. And we can't cry sovereign immunity when we get it, saying, well, we're going to spend this money. Who was it that did that with?
Oh, yeah, with the CARES.
Great example was with CARES Act. There was a delegate from Wide Ruins. He was arguing with Pearline Kirk when we got $730 million.
Yes.
$730 million from CARES Act. The delegate from Wide Ruins, Raymond Smith Jr., he was like, they don't tell us how to spend this money. We're going to spend it how we see fit. And they wanted to give that to chapters. They wanted to do by Pendleton blankets. And
so
we're just giving you an example of how some of these sitting elected officials feel that this is free money and we're going to spend it the way we want. And the controller said, no, that's not how it works.
Like with CARES dollars,
please.
and I think earlier you were asking about
Yeah.
the CHSN funds.
Yes.
The CSN funds, and Marley can jump in as well. They originally was part of a number of tribes, I should say, not just Navajo. They were initiating what they call trust litigation against the federal government. Basically saying, okay, feds, you're supposed to be our trustee, and you failed at your trust duties because you mismanage our resources. Like Navajo has oil and gas and coal, and so other tribes. I mean, I worked up at Washington. They had timber. They were a timber tribe, and so basically, these tribes are saying, BIA, you mismanage our trust assets. And so these tribes that were litigating, settled, and Navajo also was one of them. And this has to do with, I believe, Alatis and tribal leases. And so Navajo, I believe, was the largest, and it was 550 million, and the attorneys received 50 million off the top. And then that 500 million came down, and that was became known as the CHSN funds. And so that became a big pot that just, pet projects, basically. I don't know how much is, I think they're almost appropriated almost all of it, but some of those things were the type of projects that were put in were anywhere from chapter projects. I think was one year they did like a bunch of chapter projects, and then the other one that I remember, I believe this came out of the CHSN, was Navajo Gaming Enterprise. They received a loan, and it mirrored the USDA rural loan program with like really low rates, and the term was like 40-year term. And I don't remember what NTUA used those loan funds for from the CHSN, but all I remember was I had to paper that deal. But those are the type of things that were spent on or appropriate. So there's lots of things that the CHSN funds have been used for.
A lot.
Yes. Like the glove factory.
Oh, okay. Then we're going to have to hold off on that subject. So, before we move on to our next part of our agenda, I want to ask Marley, do you want to share any inside information or common knowledge about how the CHSN fund came about, as I'm sure you were there in the midst of those talks as well?
The history of that creation before the Navajo Nation Council, it involves someone who is currently working right now in President Nygren's office, and that should tell you a lot. And that was former council delegate Leonard Sosi. And he was also a part of the Resources and Development Committee. And he had a strategy to push through this. He wanted to have a uranium, or he said it was just going to be to show the people what in situ uranium mining was. And so it got, of course, a lot of pushback. And so instead of having the meeting in Window Rock, he took it out to, I can't remember where. It was really a remote chapter. But people went out there anyway. And this was under President Hale. And I'm talking about that because there's a lot of manipulation. And people have to understand that when the council debates. And that's why people, if you can't tune in, to tune in later, or to, sometimes Lene will do a little wrap up, or I'll do a wrap up.
Yeah.
But please always question the press releases from the council and the president, and even the judicial branch, because the press releases, they're there, they're being produced to make the executive branch look great and wonderful, and the same thing for the council and, the judicial branch. So in the CHSN fund, when that was first debated, it was debated, of course, this is going to be the best thing for our people.
Right.
So we need to make sure that it was equally provided to the chapters, and then they went back to that crazy law where it's based on registered voters, or, half of it is based on registered voters, the other half is just basically cut across the chapters, the 88 chapters,
formula.
split evenly among them, including large chapters like Tuba City and Chinle and Shiprock. And so when that happens, and this is why there is still no 5-year plan on how to use the interest that has been earned from our permanent trust fund, because they get into this mode of, no, my chapter needs it more because of this. And they go into these grandiose speeches, but none of them brings an actual finished plan to the council, to us to look at, to say, oh yeah, they're ready. There is money that has been sitting in the CHSN fund that was appropriated for chapters under the guidance of Leonard Sosi, because he got himself put in there to oversee how the CHSN funds were spent. And so there's a lot of money that's just been sitting there that wasn't spent, because it was, just buddy system again. Okay, I want my project funded. Oh, okay, no question of, was it reviewed by the investment committee? Was it reviewed by anybody? Does it comply with these laws that are in place, the Procurement Act?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So
as Otto So would say, peso da de conch.
Mm-hmm. It's rotting.
He would say that.
Yeah. And so I really think that for those that question, like me, I'm like, what is CHSN? Where is that coming from? And it was to the tune of 550 million, around that much. And it was supposed to be used specifically for certain projects, programs, whatever. And it just kind of became a free-for-all. It kind of became, well, I'm going to take this much for my C-store, or I'm going to take this much for, I think, heavy equipment, right?
Yeah.
Heavy equipment for all 110 chapters. They said, oh, we're going to get heavy equipment for all 100. Go ahead, Marley. Go ahead.
You know what? I just remembered when you said that. I thought, I attended a grand opening out in Eastern Navajo, and I think it was Pueblo Pintado, for a C-store. And they actually had set it up like a C-store. There was a few items in there, but otherwise, it was a grocery store waiting, C-store waiting for, the pumps and everything to start working. And they had a big dinner, speeches and everything else. And there's no C-store out there. I went out there to check on it, and it's just boarded up.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I mean. There's no follow-up. That audit that we have done by KPMG, they should even be our auditors. There's a national audit law or something, policy that, if your company, or especially government, you should only have your auditor at a maximum for 3 years.
Yes.
Because then relationships start building. And that's what happened with KPMG. They receive contracts. And there's no audit of our council. We don't really audit the general funds, and that's what funds the council and the president's office, the political appointees. And you look over at the judicial branch to see where their general funds are going, because you're not going to see any audit on that.
Wow.
So just to clarify, the financial and the single audit, they have their scope. So, And so KPMG has been auditing the nation for 50 years, and that's all of what they do with tribes. During my time, I did an RFP, and we selected a different auditor. And as I understand, during the time when I was let go and I was being investigated, they literally, BNF at the time, literally tried to tell Moss Adams to invent fraud so they could go after me. And Moss Adams stood up and said, there's nothing. And that's the reason why Moss Adams got fired. So those are the things that happen. And the nation then went back to KPMG. So that's their current auditor. So.
Oh, it just, I feel like it just kind of, it's a revolving door of fraud, deception, who you're friends with, and how these funds are spent. Just like with what Marley just said, over at Pueblo Pintado, they did build that C-store based off of probably CHSN funds. And years later, she went back and that store is now boarded up. So how does, we basically, I want to say, even threw away that money because
It's the same thing with the glove factory.
Yeah.
Right? I remember that deal. It was Seth Damon pretty much pushing the whole thing because his relative, like a sister or cousin or somebody, was at economic development, and they were working on that deal. And back then, we could, our office at the controller's office at the time, we could, put in our 2 cents basically. And I usually make a point that my staff and I to, write memos and say this deal doesn't make any sense and so forth. So at the time, we didn't think it made any sense. How can you take, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was a lot of money. It was like 26 million. And it wasn't just CHSN. It was like, I want to say sales tax dollars. They were taking from different funds, and pretty much, I don't know where the glove factory is at, but I didn't understand the deal. And prior to coming to Navajo, I've worked on deals. My job was to broker deals and make it happen. And so these deals didn't make any sense to me.
Okay, I'm going to pause this conversation right now because we have a special guest right now, and she only has about 10 minutes to share with us this very important news and information regarding our people, and she's going to be sharing with us facts about the uranium ore haul. And we really need to know from the boots on the ground nonprofits who are out there studying the effects of uranium ore. And I guess the biggest question is to our special guest, Leona, is this something that, do those tarps, A, do they hold down uranium ore? B, to their knowledge, did the Havasupai, the Hopi, and the Ute tribe, were they consulted with this haul that's going across Deneta? And also, see, they're trying to make it sound like uranium ore isn't dangerous. So I think that those are the questions I want to pose to Leona. Leona, can you go ahead and unmute yourself and please share information? And thank you for joining us. And please introduce yourself, Leona.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Oh.
All right. Yate she twitch eating the schlitz and I'll be chin kia ani dashe twohuglini dashinala. I'm from Fort Defiance, actually. I'm from my family's from Eastern, so I'm kind of a visitor out here in the western side. I'm actually in Western right now. So just to answer your questions, maybe I'll go in a different order. So So for folks that don't know me, I have been working on uranium issues since 2007, and then I started working on nuclear, mostly energy, radioactive waste issues since 2012, maybe 2014. And then just recently, I'm also really focused on nuclear weapons. So this is all part of the uranium fuel chain. And so just to remind folks, we do have a law that there's no uranium mining allowed on the Navajo Nation proper, but there's, of course, the checkerboard area, which is questionable, and then most of these companies already own private land just outside the res. So that's what brings into question our transport issue. So with the transport, we have a law saying no transport. There's supposed to be, well, we had a law that said no transport since 2012. In August last year, the council did an emergency legislation to change that law from no transport to regulating transport. And a lot of this started because I would say, you know, the work that Paul No has done over the years to tell people about the transport, get people involved. Well, last year, Boo Nygren was somebody who thought he wanted to, you know, get involved in this fight, which was only a very short moment when they organized a march around at Cameron. So when we were talking about transport, you know, since 2016, Paul No started to challenge energy fuels, not just at the mine here in Arizona at the Grand Canyon. There's also a mine just west of Mount Taylor. It's not on our sacred mountain, but it's in the region. That's called Roca Honda. So they're both owned by Energy Fuels. And then Energy Fuels also owns the mill. This is the White Mesa Uranium Mill in Southeast Utah. And it's the only mill in the country, and it processes two things. One is uranium ore, and the other one is called alternate feed, which is basically any kind of radioactive waste. So then they're not just processing uranium, they're trying to produce other stuff at the mill, and then they use it as a storage, a waste dump. So to answer one of your questions,
oh, we lost her. Eleanor, can you let her know we lost her?
Yeah, I'll text her.
Okay. Do you want to, I don't know if you have any information based off what she was sharing. Eleanor, would you be able to share any of the uranium aspect of what she was talking about?
I'd like to hear more about what the Pinon mine does. That was interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know as much as Leona, but there is the Pinon Plain uranium mine located near Grand Canyon National Park. And that is where the Energy Fuels is taking uranium gravel rocks from there and transporting it, you know, through Flagstaff on highway, is it 89?
89.
And yeah, and then turning off towards
160
Tuba on highway 160, and then coming as far, you know, through Kayenta and then through to Mexican Water turnoff, and then turning off from there into Utah. And going into Blanding and taking it there to the White Mesa Mill site. And so I talked to the vice president of Energy Fuels a couple of weeks ago in Scottsdale. And I asked him some questions. And I asked him specifically, you know, where or how. So I asked him first, how many trucks are going to be going through our reservation?
Oh no. Hang on. Hang on, everybody. Hang on. Somebody was trying to call me. Hang on just a second. Give me a second, okay? I am going to fix this real quick. I apologize. Let me start the meeting again. Okay, meetings. And I am gonna go. Give me a second, everybody. Technical difficulties. Somebody was trying to call me on Messenger, and I forgot to turn off those notifications on here. So just give me a second. I'm going to turn it off. And then I'm going to turn on the... Oh, it is off. I don't know why it was. Okay. Hang on. I'm starting that meeting again. Okay. This one. And I want to go here. And I want to start... Okay. I'm starting the meeting again.
Recording in progress. And then it started to mine in January. And in January last year, and then the first transport occurred on July 30th. And this is when the Navajo Nation president got involved and did a...
Leona, can I stop you for a minute?
In Cameron.
Leona.
On August...
Oh.
I think it was August 2nd. I need to...
Leona.
So that happened, and it brought attention to the issue on a more of a regional level, and he took that to the governor, which started this 6-month pause. So we have a law against uranium mining since 2005.
Leona, can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. We lost you, and then I got disconnected on my end. So can you restart from, I'm so sorry, but can you restart about the beginning of when you just started, when you came back online?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just was saying, okay,
Yes.
the mine was licensed in 1986. Navajo Nation enacted a law in 2005 to say no mining on the Navajo Nation. In 2012, we made a law that says no transport. And this mine that we're watching, Pinyon Plain, we knew that the transport would eventually come through the Navajo Nation, going to the mill. Just like Roca Honda, we knew, Paul knew that Roca Honda would, if it ever came online and became operational, Roca Honda would be another place they would take out uranium and then transport it through the res to the mill.
Right.
So Hallno was always concerned about the transport, but really, in order to stop the transport, we need to stop the mine. And so that is an issue that we were getting some traction on that last year, but there's a lot of work to stop the mine. That's a big one. But going back to this transport, we have a law that says no transport. But we don't have jurisdiction on the U.S. and state highways.
Yeah.
So the haul route is mostly U.S. and state highways. And the Navajo Nation, and this was something debated in Nabi the other day. Eugenia Charles Newton was bringing up the idea of, Mr. Ed City, the Navajo Nation EPA executive director, is always saying that we can't fight it. We want to stop the transport, but he's saying we can't stop it 100% because of federal preemption, that we don't have jurisdiction on the U.S. or state highways. And so this is something that was brought up in Nabi, that federal preemption can be waived. So this is a new thing that came up this week, and it's something that I hope the council will explore. But what happened last year was on July 30th, 2 trucks got through the Navajo Nation to the mill. And then on August 2nd, there was the beginning of what was called a 6-month pause. And so that 6-month pause is over now. On January 29th this year, the Navajo Nation, the reason why the pause was started was because the governor was encouraging the tribe and the Energy Fuels to come to some agreement that the Navajo Nation would be okay with Energy Fuels transporting. So while the Navajo Nation and Energy Fuels were talking, this was supposed to be a 6-month pause, and they were saying they're going to negotiate. So there's this negotiation happening, and our group, and I'm sure the general public who were aware, we assume the negotiation is only about the transport. And so on January 29th, the news came out that and the news didn't come from Navajo, the news came from an email from Energy Fuels to its stockholders at 6 in the morning, 6:05 on January 29th, that the negotiations were done. And in that announcement, it talked about, oh yes, we didn't have to submit to, we didn't have to legally agree to this, but we're such a good corporate citizen, we're the good guys, we're trying to help the Navajo Nation. And so they're going to let us transport, and we're going to agree to all these safety levels to help protect their people kind of thing. But then down below in that announcement was this really unexpected thing that now they were announcing, oh, and we're also going to help to clean up Navajo. We're going to do cleanup by bringing uranium waste from abandoned mines to the mill. And so we're going to clean up Navajo, taking 10,000 tons off the res for free. And then again at Navi this week, they said 30,000. Nobody's talking about how much money that Energy Fuels is possibly paying the tribe for this waste. How much money would they be benefiting from if they were able to extract marketable rare earth elements from that radioactive waste? So essentially, the Navajo Nation is giving raw material, selling, we don't know the amount, this is questionable, but that uranium waste has other stuff in it that White Mesa Mill wants to develop. And so this is under the guise of critical minerals, so critical minerals, national security, all of that to be pushed forward, so-called energy independence or domestic energy independence because of nuclear energy. So right now, the push in the world for climate is there's a lot of people saying nuclear is clean, that nuclear is safe. And so the reason is they only count the impact at the power plant. And the impact is not minimal. It's not safe. It's just that they don't measure anything before the power plant. They don't count any of the uranium mining in the carbon footprint. They don't count, all of the impacts to our people, the mining, the milling. We call this a front end. And then they also don't count in the carbon footprint of nuclear energy the back end, which is the waste produced at the power plant, which is radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years. And also needs to be managed and contained, which will take a lot of energy. And so they just don't measure these things. They don't count it. And so we really need to push back because right now in the international arena, there's a very strong push for uranium. More than 30 countries are trying to triple their nuclear energy development by 2050.
Wow.
So this is something happening. And then at the same time, in 2012, Obama signed a Nuclear Modernization Act to renew our nuclear arsenal. And so some of those things are also taking place now. Like there was a bunch of hearings at Los Alamos National Labs this week regarding, this is a bomb factory. So all of these things are happening at the same time that there's, a proposal for another mill. So we only have one mill in the country, but there's a proposal for more everything, more mining, more milling, other nuclear facilities, more weapons, more plutonium production, what they call plutonium pits. And with it, all of it, with it comes radioactive waste, whether it's like piles of uranium, dirt, or, there's all these different names and classifications. It could be tritium releases, it could be high-level radioactive waste, it could be just all the different things, greater than Class C. There's all these classifications for radioactive waste. Essentially, the United States doesn't have anywhere to put it. And so other countries also don't have anywhere to put it. So other countries are sending their waste to White Mesa Mill. And so the mill is being supported by the United States Department of Energy.
Wow.
The Department of Energy is putting millions of dollars into the mill to develop their capacity and technology on rare earth elements, how to develop those and produce those under this alternate feed license. So, okay, that's a lot of information, but going back to the pause. So we thought the pause was going to be just for the transport. And then we find out it's not just about the transport for this one route. It could possibly be the transport for both the Pinyon Plain and Roca Honda. So these are things we need to be very clear. This agreement to allow Energy Fuels onto Diné land between 8:30 to 10, hauling so many trucks and blah, blah, blah. This is also, I'm not sure if the same exact agreement is going to allow Roca Honda or if they're going to just use all the same stuff and then do another agreement. But essentially, this is a similar type of agreement that would be used if other uranium mining companies want to start transporting. So this is just the 1st. We're looking at other uranium mining companies that want to transfer through the res. If they want to do it immediately, they're going to have to go through negotiations with the tribe. So let me back up a little bit. Our transportation law that says no transport, because Ed City thinks that we can't fight it.
Right.
On August 26th last year, they did an emergency legislation to change the no transport to regulating transport. And so what that means is, it means a lot of things. There's a little bit, I think there's some little bit of benefit that this also opens up the beginning of creating regulations for hazardous materials transport through the res. So our nation never had these regulations to limit these materials, to limit, how many trucks, the quality of tarps you were asking about. We never had these regulations in place. We never had fees. We never had, if the company spilled or did this. So this is, to me, I don't know. I mean, it could be a benefit that the Navajo Nation is beginning to look at, how to protect our people and hold companies accountable when they contaminate. But the thing is, it allows uranium transport. And so this is what we're not happy about. And those negotiations between Energy Fuels and the tribe were completely private. And it was only between a small elite, I would say, or executive type of, small group of Dene people who were part of this negotiations. And this week at Nabi, a lot of the council were really upset that they weren't included. So the Navajo Nation did not notify or consult any other tribes in this negotiations, but they did not consult our people. They did not talk to the chapters. They did not do hearings, nothing. And even the council had no clue what was in this document until they did this week at Nabi, they did hand out the agreement. And so people got to see a hard copy of it, but they had to give it back. They couldn't, in the agreement is a confidentiality clause that the Navajo Nation can't share the agreement. And I'm not sure what the repercussions are if they do. But this is where we're at, is that the Navajo Nation is in business with Energy Fuels, not only to allow the transport, but they're saying cleanup, but to me, it's really actually production of rare elements, other things.
Yeah.
There's a lot more stuff. I'm probably leaving things out. And before I wrap up, do you have any? So the tarps, is it dangerous? It's really, that's not an easy question to ask. I think it depends a lot on, there's a lot of factors. And I would say, it's not 100% contained. And I think without proper measurements and things like that, we can't prove that they're safe or not safe, or that they're poor quality. They're supposed to be high quality. They're supposed to be, able to contain the dust. I'm not sure. I honestly don't know if they're 100% effective or what level of effectiveness they are. And this is something we'll be learning, because now the tribe is requiring measurements, weight, and like radiation readings. So whatever the readings are when they leave the mine, if it's much less at the mill, then something got left in the middle.
Leona, I have a quick question. Are you aware of any sort of hazmat crew or team that will be boots on the ground if an accident happened Monday morning at 8:30?
Well, this Monday is a holiday.
Or, I'm sorry. Let's say Tuesday. Yeah, let's say Tuesday morning, their first haul. Something happens just past Cameron, going down into that little that little canyon there.
Right. So there's a lot of information available. We didn't post the Navajo Nation EPA's fact sheet, but that lists some of the stuff that's in the negotiations, like they can only transport and this again, the paper says 2 to 10 trucks a day.
Yeah.
But then Ed City said 2 to 12 earlier this week at the Navajo Uranium Commission meeting. So ask me your question again. I've started thinking about
my question is, if there was an accident on that horrible Highway 89, which is very bumpy and washboardy, And if let's say there was crosswinds and the truck tipped over with all the uranium ore in there, is there a Navajo Nation hazmat team in place that can get there in record time as of today?
No. So part of the negotiations, the company is supposed to have an emergency preparedness plan, and it would be up to the company to initiate whatever that is. So a chain of events would be they call a hazmat or, first responders, depending where the accident is. So if the driver is incapacitated, if the accident, let's say, the driver's hurt, can't do this, it would fall on the nearest bystander. If it's on Navajo land, if it's in our communities, if anyone sees something, they're expected to know and have the number to the local police station and call the police. And then the police are supposed to be the first responders that would then call whatever other folks for cleanup or whatever. And right now, at this point, to my knowledge, none of the police have been trained, the Navajo police. The DPS is supposed to be responsible for all of this. However, DPS doesn't have the equipment or the personnel or the training for this specific stuff. Part of the agreement is the companies are supposed to get a license to transport and then pay into this fund to, pay to go through our nation. And then this fund is supposed to start to accumulate that would pay for things like checkpoints, staffing. So all the stuff that we need to do these regulations don't exist. Okay, I keep forgetting, I keep restarting, but on August 26th, when the tribe made the emergency legislation, they said, okay, we're not gonna prohibit transport, we're gonna regulate. And they gave themselves 12 months to write those regulations. So we don't even have those regulations, and they're not codified, or they don't exist yet. So that's why we have this negotiation. So whenever the tribe finishes its regulations, companies are supposed to go through whatever process they create. But between now and then, this negotiation that Energy Fuels has entered, the other companies can do the same until the regulations are complete and codified. But until then, it's an interesting interim period while the transport is allowed. There's no hazmat or response teams trained and ready to go on the res, and whatever the company does, everything with the nuclear industry is self-regulated. So they self-report. And so that means if nobody saw it and they don't report it, it didn't happen. So this is really important that we need to be watching them. And the thing is that, folks, I think we need a lot of education around this, because we don't want people running to a uranium spill. If an ore truck dumped out all kinds of uranium on the wherever, we don't want people running over there. I mean, of course, you want to see if the driver or whoever, if there's another car involved, if it's a big accident, you want to make sure people are safe. But this is the thing for the first responders. How would they know it's safe? Radiation is invisible, odorless, tasteless. You can't sense it with your human body unless they know what to see, what to look for, or if they have a Geiger counter or some kind of device to know. So all of these things are mostly unknown, and the reason they say that, so the Tarks, I'm not sure, there was no consultation with other tribes and our own people. And then the other question you asked earlier was you asked another question.
Actually, Leona, I know I only have a short amount of time with you. I want to ask another question, and this involves Eleanor. Because of this uranium ore haul that's going along Route 89 and then turning east onto the 160 all the way to the White Mesa Mills Company, now we have another pipeline that's being proposed right now for hydrogen along that same 160 and Highway 89. Now we're going to have not only 2 to 4 years of uranium ore haul along this route. Now there's a proposal for a hydrogen pipeline on that same route. Okay, my question is, that would decimate our lands if there was a collision between the pipeline and the uranium ore truck that might hit it, because it's going to be right next to it, literally parallel to the pipeline. What are the effects of an accident happening between the two on Navajo lands?
Eleanor.
This is something no one is talking about. No one is talking about. There's something else coming up, people. Look, there's a proposed pipeline coming through. How is the Navajo Nation gonna handle that?
Yeah, so let me just share this little map here, our little brochure. I don't know if you can see it.
It's blurry.
But blurry. Oh dear. Okay. I'm sorry, but this is the pipeline route. So it comes from the Four Corners area, goes all the way off the reservation at Cameron. I'm sorry.
And then it goes on the 160 and it goes south on the 89 in reverse of the uranium hull ore, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the proposed hydrogen pipeline will come in from Hogback Chapter, go through, and that's on the Mexico side, cross Arizona state lines, go along Highway 160, and then down towards Cameron.
Which is the 89.
89, yeah. And they also propose it's going to go under the Colorado River. So they're planning to bury this pipeline, not very far, maybe about just a few feet underground. And so hauling uranium through along that same route, of course, this hydrogen pipeline will have a lot of potential for leaks, because hydrogen is a very it wants to leak. That's its property. So keeping it in a pipeline, they have to keep it at a certain pressure, at a certain temperature to keep moving it. So they're going to have compressor stations along the way. And once it leaks, it has the potential to explode, not just catch fire, but explode. So, and so that's why it's a very volatile pipeline. The only way I could foresee that intersecting is maybe a uranium truck somehow gets in an accident and bursts the pipeline, and that would cause a huge explosion. And then uranium, of course, would be
in the air.
Spilled. Yeah, be in the air and the water and the land, all in that area. So that would be probably a high scenario, a low percentage scenario that would happen. But yes, it's possible. I guess you would say. But yeah, that's just a lot of for both of those to be routed along that highway. I mean, we're talking killing your economic development opportunities along that roadway for
a C-store, a gas station.
Because the hydrogen, you can't build anything on the pipeline or even near the pipeline because it's so volatile. So, any businesses to be located along that route, that would be out of the question. So just too many risks associated with it.
And just to add, you were asking why do they say that the uranium isn't dangerous, and that's largely because it's not processed yet. We know uranium is radioactive. It's an alpha emitter. We don't want to get uranium into our body. We want to protect ourselves from exposure. But even though it's not processed, as we've learned through these discussions, the roads are carrying all kinds of stuff we don't know about. So this one issue, it's really opening, I hope, our tribe's eyes to all of the dangerous things being transported. So hydrogen, if there is because it's highly combustible, and like Eleanor was saying, and I know TNA has a lot of information on this. This is where I learned some of it, that because it's highly combustible and can explode, this would be the worst case scenario. And this is something when we were working on a different waste issue, I was working on a different transport issue regarding waste from nuclear power plants. They did a study in the 80s regarding Yucca Mountain, like transporting high-level radioactive waste to Yucca Mountain. The worst case scenario would be an explosion. Let's say it ran into a petroleum truck and then it exploded and it spread out the radioactive materials all over. In that study, they said that it could spread into a 42 square mile area. We don't have any studies about any of this for hydrogen, the combination or the cumulative impacts. And when these things are licensed, they're only looking at that one thing. They don't look at, well, this transport's happening in the same place that this hydrogen pipeline is being built. So everything is,
isolated,
permitted separately. They don't count the cumulative impact. And I gotta go, but if you have any question, I just gotta wrap
And
it.
can you share your website with us, Leona, before you leave? Is there a website that we can look at?
Yeah, and so Hall No is a volunteer-led organization, and so our website is a little behind, but you can follow our social media, hallno.com. On Instagram, it's hall_no, and then we also have a Facebook page, and if anyone wants to contact us, our email is canyonmine@gmail.com, and we're volunteers, we're doing all of this work, we're all Lene. We have a group that is working together as a, we're trying to do a lot of work, but we appreciate donations is what I'm trying to get at. If that's something folks can do, go to our website, or, send us something in the apps. That would be very much appreciated, because this fight is not just energy fuels. This transport and all the stuff coming, there's other mines being permitted in other places that could go through the res. There's a lot of other things happening. And then on February 6th, in Arizona, the Arizona Corporation Commission just published that they want to explore building small modular nuclear reactors or new nuclear power plants on old coal plants. So this is not just uranium, all the other threats are coming too. So it's a good time, I hope, for folks to start learning, and we can provide information, education, trainings, workshops, just
and to get ahead of it, because right now we have this information highway where it is being told to all of us, this is coming in, guys. Let's get together and protect our lands and protect Mother Earth, our air, our water, our people. So thank you so much, Leona, for joining us. And I'm sure, and I will share the Facebook page as well.
All of you. Thank you for all the work you do. I'm very honored to be in this group of women.
Leona. All righty, you too.
Thank you, Leona.
So Eleanor, I want to go ahead and finish out. Actually, if you want to